Okay, so I wanted to jump on here and talk a little bit about sourdough. So we have named our sourdough Isabella because she came from Italy. She was given to us from a coworker and it's been alive for 150 years. So first of all, name your starter because you're going to take better care of her. So we keep ours in the fridge and we get it out the night before we're going to feed it to bring it to room temperature. So right now it's very pancake-like. There's no bubbles. It's very, you can see that it's dropped down. So you don't want to feed it when it's cold. I mean, you can, but bring it to room temperature. So we put it out on the counter night before, let it come to room temperature. Now, what I was doing wrong was I was discarding. I was discarding 30 grams and then I was feeding. I would take out 30 grams and then I would put back in 30 grams of bread flour and 30 grams of water straight from the tap. And actually it was hot water, the hottest I could get it. Don't do that. When you have a established starter like this, you don't have to discard. So what I did this time was let it come to room temperature and then I weighed out how much starter I had and I 1-to-1-to-1 ratio. So let's just pretend you should probably label your jars to know how heavy your jar is. And then let's say I have 300 grams of starter here in this jar. Then I would want to put this into a bigger bowl. I have some metal bowls and I would feed it. If it was 300 grams, I would feed it 300 grams of water and 300 grams of all-purpose flour. We're gonna use all-purpose flour to feed, okay? And I was using bread flour to feed. Okay, again, I was not using 1-to-1 ratio. I was discarding and then replacing just a little bit. So I can't believe I did not ruin Isabella, but I didn't. So this time I did 1-to-1-to-1. All right, and then I let that sit and bubble up really high. And that's something I wasn't waiting to do either. So I let it sit for a good 4 to 6 hours. And so then 4 to 6 hours after you feed it is when you're gonna wanna make your bread because you want it to be big and bubbly and active. That means it's not hungry, and that's when you want to bake your bread. So then that's when you take out whatever portion your bread recipe calls for, and I can send you a bread recipe that works. It's not the one I learned from the class I went to because that is special to her, and I want to respect that, but I can send you the one that I have used that works. But you take out a portion of that fed starter that is very bubbly and has been sitting for 4 to 6 hours in a warm spot. And then you add to that your water, your salt, and your bread flour. Now, I was using water from the tap, but you want to use room temperature filtered water. So we just bought a Brita, keeping it on our counter, and that way it is filtered water and it does not have all of the stuff from the tap, and room temperature. So both for feeding and for your bread. So after you after you mix your bread, then this is another thing I was doing wrong. I was putting the dough on the counter with some flour and kneading it, right? I was kind of folding, what's it called? Stretch and fold, but I was doing it on the counter and really kneading it and adding in more flour. Well, you don't want to add in more flour because you've added the exact amounts of flour. So I was doing that wrong. So just leave it in the metal bowl. You mix it, mix it with your hands and then stretch and fold. Stretch, fold in the bowl, stretch, fold, and then quarter turn 4 times. And you need to do that every 4 to 5 hours. So now you're talking, you've fed it in the morning, you've got 4 to 6 hours. So now you're to lunchtime. Then you've got to be around for the next 4 to 5 hours to stretch and fold it 4 times, 5 times every hour. So this is a labor of love. So if anybody's ever made you a loaf of sourdough, it's a labor of love. So stretch and fold 4 times, and then we put it into the fridge for overnight fermentation, and that's when you're proofing it. And then after that, you can make your bread in the oven. Make sure that you are heating your oven for at least an hour. At least an hour. So take out your dough, shape it into your ball very quickly from the fridge into the very, very hot cast iron Dutch oven, and then into the oven for, we do 20 minutes in it covered, and then you take it out and do another 20 minutes on a sheet pan or on the rack. That just helps the cooking. Another thing I learned is to squirt some water on it right before you put it in, just a little bit, just to help with that crispy crust. And it should come out better. So I hope this was helpful. Message me if you want. I didn't know this, but you can actually spread out your starter very, very, very thin on a piece of parchment paper and let it completely dry until it crumbles like paper. And then you can ship it to somebody, and then they can rehydrate it with water, and then they have your starter. So I don't know, I'm gonna figure that out. I don't have a lot of Isabella to share. This time go around, I made 3 loaves with mine, and then I made 1 loaf with the Hello Sourdough Girl, her starter that she gave me. So we're gonna compare the 2 sourdoughs side by side tomorrow when we make the bread. So another video to come. So something we learned was that you need to feed your starter a 1-to-1-to-1 ratio. So the first one is the starter ratio, then the water is the second one, and then the flour. So 1-to-1-to-1. So here is me feeding the starter those proportions. After your starter sits for 4 to 6 hours, it should look like this. Very bubbly, ready to make into bread. Here is how you stretch and fold. You would do this 4 times every hour. And then this is what it looks like after it comes out of the fridge. The first one was perfectly proofed. That one is underproofed, but both still made a good loaf of bread.